My son called me the babysitter. His wife said, "For free, right?" So I sent them my invoice and the lawyer. Dinner at my son's house always felt like an obligation, never an invitation. Melissa liked to arrange things: flowers, silverware, people. I was usually the last one seated, the only one without a glass of wine. The smell of roasted chicken filled the room, but it was the tension that fed everyone more than the food. Ryan adjusted his cufflinks, the same nervous habit he had since he was 10, and Melissa was scrolling through her phone until she spoke without looking up. "Mom, we need you here at 7. The daycare's closed, and we can't afford a nanny right now." I set down my fork slowly. "You mean their grandmother?" I asked, my voice calm but sharp enough to slice through the air. Ryan gave a small sigh. "Don't make this complicated, Mom. You're free most days. It's just babysitting." "Just babysitting." Melissa laughed, tossing her hair back. "For free, right? I mean, that's what family's for." The sound of her laughter bounced off the marble counter, crisp and hollow. The kids were giggling in the other room, too young to know that the laughter around this table wasn't kind. "Then maybe family should pay better than strangers do," I said softly. The words came out smoother than I expected. The room froze. The only sound left was the hum of the refrigerator and the faint clinking of ice in Ryan's glass. Melissa stared at me, as if I had just broken something expensive. "Relax, Mom," Ryan said finally, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "It's a joke." I took a slow sip of water. "Oh, I'm relaxed, dear," I said, "just counting my unpaid hours." If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. Melissa rolled her eyes. "You always have to make everything about money." I looked down at my plate, the food already cold. "No," I said. "I make everything about fairness. There's a difference." Ryan sighed louder this time, the way men do when they think patience is the same as virtue. "Mom, please, not tonight. It's been a long week." "For you?" I asked. "Or for me?" He looked away. Melissa leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Honestly, Tanya, we're trying to build a life here. You sitting around the house doesn't exactly help us move forward." Her voice was dripping with that brand of fake sweetness that only people who've never needed help can master. "You could at least do something useful. Watch the kids, cook dinner, keep busy." I stared at her for a long time. She was beautiful in that plastic, exhausting, way-smooth skin, perfect hair, eyes that had never seen a single sleepless night from real worry. I thought of the years I spent raising Ryan alone after his father died, working double shifts, clipping coupons, paying off that first mortgage one envelope at a time. And now, here I was, being told to earn my keep in a house I helped them buy. "Melissa," I said slowly, "did you ever thank me for selling my house so you could have yours?" She blinked. "That was years ago." "Yes," I said, "it was." I pushed my chair back slightly. "Time flies when you're unpaid labor." Ryan rubbed his temples. "Mom, you're overreacting." "Am I?" I asked. "You need someone to raise your children, clean your kitchen, and you call it help. But when I ask for respect, suddenly I'm dramatic." Melissa smirked. "We just thought you'd want to feel useful." "I already am useful," I said. "I'm just not appreciated." She stood up abruptly. "God, you're impossible." She grabbed her plate, clattering it into the sink. The kids peeked in from the living room, wide-eyed. Ryan motioned for them to go back, embarrassed. "She doesn't mean it," he whispered, trying to save face. "She's just tired." "So am I," I said. Melissa turned, hands on her hips. "You can quit any time, you know. Nobody's forcing you." "You're right," I said. "Nobody forces saints, they just expect them." I stood, picking up my empty plate. 7 o'clock then? I'll be here on time. After all, I wouldn't want to disappoint my employers." Her eyes widened. "That's not funny." "Neither is unpaid work," I said, and carried my plate to the sink. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was absolute. Even the air seemed to stop moving. As I rinsed the dish, I saw my reflection in the window above the sink. An old woman with tired eyes, hair pulled back neatly, a smile that had learned to hide behind politeness. But beneath that reflection, I saw something else resolve, the kind that doesn't need to shout because it's already decided what comes next. Ryan cleared his throat. "We'll talk about this later, Mom." "We will," I said, drying my hands. "Just remember, Ryan, some conversations don't end where you think they do." Melissa grabbed her phone and muttered something about entitled boomers, heading upstairs. Ryan followed her halfway, then turned back. "Mom," he said quietly, "please don't make this harder than it needs to be." I gave him the softest smile I could manage. "Oh, sweetheart," I said. "I haven't even started yet." When they were gone, I walked back to the table and gathered the napkins. I stacked the plates, straightened the chairs, just as I always did. The rhythm of care came naturally, even when it wasn't returned. But as I wiped the crumbs from the polished surface, I felt something shift inside me. Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe it was clarity. Either way, I knew this. They thought they were saving money. They had no idea what it would cost them. When I sold my house 12 years ago, I thought I was buying a future for my son. It was a small blue house in Mesa, nothing fancy, but it was mine every nail, every crack in the wall, every rose bush that bloomed out front. He had big dreams, always did. "It's just temporary, Mom," he promised, his hand over mine at the kitchen table. "Once the paperwork settles, I'll add your name to the title. It'll be our family home. Yours too." I believed him. Mothers always do. But when the realtor handed over the final deed, only one name was written on it: Ryan Hart. I noticed the missing space where mine should have been, and before I could ask, Melissa laughed softly, waving a manicured hand. "It's cleaner if it's under one name," she said. "Less messy for taxes." Her tone was so casual it almost disguised the sharpness beneath it. I looked at Ryan, expecting him to correct her, to say, "Of course, Mom's name belongs there too." But he just smiled awkwardly, kissed my forehead, and said, "You know how these things go. Mom, it's just paperwork." Paperwork. That word has ruined more families than betrayal ever could. The first few months, in their new Scottsdale house, were filled with the kind of politeness that feels like distance dressed up in courtesy. Melissa had a designer for everything: the curtains, the garden, even the way the kids' toys were displayed on the shelves. She called it curated living. I called it no room for memories. At first, I tried to help. I offered to cook on weekends, water the plants, read bedtime stories to the twins. But the more I gave, the less I seemed to belong. It started small. My wedding photo disappeared from the mantel, replaced by an abstract print that fit the aesthetic. Then the rocking chair Henry built for me vanished from the porch, replaced by something made of chrome and discomfort. "We're modernizing, Tanya," Melissa said when I asked about it. "You wouldn't understand. Less is more." Less of me, apparently. Soon, she began calling it her house. At first, it was just slips of the tongue. "I love how my kitchen catches the morning light. My yard is finally shaping up." But the words grew bolder. One afternoon, she walked into the living room while I was folding laundry and said, half joking, half not, "You should really feel lucky, Tanya. Most people your age can't afford to live in a place like this." I looked at her and smiled. "Most people my age already paid for theirs," I said. She didn't laugh. The neighbors adored her, always waving when she stepped outside with her perfect hair and perfect smile. They'd ask about the house, the kids, Ryan's work, and once in a while, someone would mention me. "You must be so proud," Mrs. Kensington next door told me one day. "You raised such a successful man. This family's doing so well because of you." Before I could respond, Melissa appeared in the doorway, all sunshine and poison. "Yeah," she said sweetly. "She was great with numbers. Now she just counts nap times." The laughter that followed wasn't cruel in sound, but it was in meaning. I excused myself, walked back into the house, and closed the door quietly behind me. That's the trick. When you live with people who mistake your kindness for invisibility, learn to shut doors without making noise. The next morning, I found my things moved again. My porcelain teapot, the one Henry gave me on our 10th anniversary, had been boxed up and placed in the garage. The guest room where I stayed when the kids were small now had Melissa's home office sign on the door. My clothes were moved to the linen closet. "We just need more space," she said, with that bright, empty smile. That evening, as they talked about remodeling plans, Melissa showed Ryan a new design mock-up on her iPad. "We're thinking of knocking down the archway and opening the space," she said. Ryan nodded. "Do it," then she added. "And maybe repainting the guest room. It's too nostalgic." They both laughed. I didn't. They spoke of paint, but what they wanted was erasure. That night, I walked barefoot through the yard I'd paid for, their laughter spilling from my house. The stars mocked our small cruelties. Once, Ryan brought me flowers. Now he brought silence. Good people don't vanish, they just grow quieter. I whispered into the dark. "You'd laugh at this, Henry. They built a house out of my money, and now they pretend I'm the guest." The wind picked up, scattering a few dry leaves across the lawn. I closed my eyes and made myself a promise. If they wanted to treat me like an outsider, I'd start acting like one. Outsiders don't beg for respect. They send invoices. Unpaid work became expectation. A few hours of helping turned into days owned by others. I cooked, cleaned, raised children without pay or thanks. They loved me honestly. Their parents didn't. Each reflection showed less mother, more servant. Somewhere between breakfast and bedtime, I vanished into duty's quiet shadow. One afternoon, I was folding laundry when the new housekeeper, Anna, leaned closer and whispered, "Mrs. Hart, can I ask something?" Her accent was soft, cautious. "On their tax papers, they listed you as their live-in nanny, said you're non-salaried help. That's how they got the household deduction." I froze, the towel still in my hands. "I'm sorry. What?" She hesitated, looking around. I wasn't supposed to see, but Melissa left the folder open on the counter. I didn't answer. I just kept folding, but slower now, my heart beat suddenly too loud in the quiet room. That night, I waited until the kids were asleep and walked into the living room, where Ryan and Melissa were watching TV, both glued to their phones. "I have a question," I said, standing by the sofa. Ryan looked up, startled. "Mom? What's wrong?" "I just heard," I began carefully, "that you listed me as your nanny for tax purposes." Melissa's head snapped up. "Oh my God, Anna needs to learn to mind her business," she said with a laugh that wasn't really a laugh. "So it's true?" I asked. Ryan rubbed his neck. "Mom, it's just paperwork, nothing serious." "Nothing serious?" I repeated. "You used my name to get a tax deduction." "Relax," Melissa said, waving a manicured hand. "It's just a formality. You don't even pay rent, Tanya." I could have called the police right then. But some truths don't need sirens, they need witnesses. The way she said my name like I was a child, like I was the burden, made something in me snap quiet and clean. I smiled. Not the kind of smile that forgives, but the kind that remembers. "You're right," I said, my voice calm and low. "I don't pay rent." I paused, letting the silence stretch until even Ryan shifted in his seat. "I paid the mortgage." Melissa scoffed, pretending not to flinch. "You always bring that up. It's exhausting." "Is it?" I asked, "because the IRS might find it interesting too." Ryan frowned, finally noticing the edge in my tone. "Mom, please, don't make this bigger than it is." "Oh, it's already big," I said. "You took my name, my labor, my dignity, and you turned it into a deduction." Melissa crossed her legs and picked up her phone, pretending to scroll. "You're being dramatic. It's just a technicality." "Funny thing about technicalities," I said. "They're the only thing courts care about." For a moment, no one spoke. Even the television seemed to quiet itself, as if waiting for the air to clear. Ryan sighed. "Look, Mom, we didn't mean to upset you. It's just, you're here, and it made sense financially." "For you," I said, "not for me." He stood, his voice softening the way guilty people's voices do when they still want to win. "You've always said family helps each other." "I did," I agreed. "But help isn't the same as being written off." Melissa finally looked up, eyes cold and gleaming. You're lucky, you know, she said. Most people your age end up in some retirement home. We're keeping you in ours for free. That was it. The last nail in the coffin of patience. I set the folded towel on the armrest, perfectly neat, and said, "Then, I suppose I should thank my employers." Her smirk faltered. "Excuse me?" "I'll prepare an invoice," I said, "for services rendered." Ryan stared, caught between disbelief and the realization that his mother was no longer joking. "Mom, this isn't funny." "No," I said, smiling faintly. "It's business." I turned and left before they could answer, walking back to my room, the guest suite, as Melissa called it now. The door clicked shut behind me, and for the first time in years, I locked it. I sat at the desk by the window, opened my old laptop, and started a spreadsheet. Hours passed quietly. The moon shifted above the desert sky, silver against the stillness. I listed every hour I had worked since the day Melissa said, "You should watch the kids." Every meal cooked, every mess cleaned, every errand run. 1,344 hours. At $24 an hour, the going rate for nannies in Scottsdale, it came to $32,256. I added another $224 for gas and groceries. Total, $32,480. I saved the file, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. In the hallway, I could hear their muffled voices, angry, worried, small. It didn't matter. For years, I had been their silent support. Now, I was their quiet reckoning. As I closed the laptop, I whispered to the empty room. They turned me into an employee. They just forgot to pay me. Morning light sliced through the blinds, too bright to ignore. I sat with black coffee, staring at the blank invoice template glowing on my laptop. My fingers hovered, trembling not from fear but clarity. Then I exhaled, whispered, "Enough," and began typing what silence had owed me all along. Date, June 14. Service, childcare, meal preparation, cleaning, tutoring, transportation. Duration, 10 months. Total hours, 1,344. Hourly rate, $24. Subtotal, $32,256. Additional expenses, food, gas, phone, $224. Total due, $32,480. At the bottom, I added one more line, just for me. Payment due within 14 business days. Interest applies under Arizona domestic employment law. Then, with a small but deliberate click, I hit send. The subject line read, "Invoice 001 babysitting services rendered, unpaid." It felt cleaner than any confrontation could. No shouting, no slammed doors, just numbers cold, factual, undeniable. I didn't have to wait long. 10 minutes later, the sound of Melissa's scream sliced through the house. "You've lost your mind," she shrieked from downstairs. I closed my laptop and waited. Her footsteps pounded up the stairs like thunder. She burst into my room, holding her phone like it was evidence in a trial. "Who invoices family?" she demanded. Her voice was sharp enough to crack glass. I turned slowly in my chair, calm as Sunday morning. "Only the ones who are treated like staff," I said. Her jaw dropped. "You can't be serious. This is insane. You're not some contractor, Tanya. You're family." I smiled faintly. "Family doesn't file people as unpaid domestic help on their taxes, Melissa." She froze, her eyes widening just enough to give her guilt away. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I think you do," I said quietly. "Anna told me." I didn't believe her at first. But then I looked into it, and it turns out the IRS is quite interested in misclassified household labor. Ryan appeared in the doorway then, half-dressed for work, his tie still undone. "What's going on?" he asked, already sounding exhausted. "She's blackmailing us," Melissa said, her voice trembling with outrage. I stood, folding my hands in front of me. "No, dear. I'm invoicing you. That's what people do when they're owed money." Ryan rubbed his temples. "Mom, please, let's just talk about this like adults." "I've been trying to do that for 10 months, I said. "Adults listen. Children take advantage." "Come on, he said, trying to soften his tone. You live here for free. You eat our food, you use our utilities. Really? I interrupted, my voice steady as stone. Then maybe I should start charging rent for my half. Melissa blinked. Your half? I nodded. Yes. The $120,000 I paid toward this house. That still buys a share, doesn't it? The silence that followed was so heavy it almost hummed. Ryan looked down, his face pale. Melissa's expression twisted into something halfway between fury and disbelief. You can't prove that, she hissed. I have the transfer receipt, I said simply. Dated, signed, and saved. You see, I may be old, but I'm not careless. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Ryan took a step forward, his voice cracking. Mom, please, let's just calm down. This isn't necessary. We're family. You can't just… Can't I? I asked, meeting his eyes. You called me the babysitter, Ryan. She called me free labor. You turned me into something I never wasn't. Now you're surprised that I know my worth? Melissa scoffed. Oh, so this is about revenge. About control. No, I said, my voice softening, but only slightly. It's about record-keeping. You both seem to like paperwork, so I made some of my own. She threw her phone onto the bed, her face red. You'll regret this, Tanya. You really will. I don't regret charging for my time, I said. Time is the one thing we never get back, dear. You'd think someone so obsessed with value would understand that. Ryan sighed, running a hand through his hair. So what now? You expect us to write you a check? Not exactly, I said. I expect accountability, but if you'd prefer a check, that works too. I'm flexible. He stared at me for a long time, then muttered, This isn't who you are. I tilted my head slightly. Maybe it's exactly who I am. You just forgot. I turned and walked to the window, looking out over the yard where I'd spent countless afternoons pushing their children on the swing. The sun was lower now, the light turning gold against the desert dust. Melissa's reflection hovered in the glass behind me, tight-lipped, fuming, powerless. You can't just send legal threats, she snapped finally. It's ridiculous. Oh, I didn't send a threat, I said without turning. That'll be the next email. This one was just a bill. She laughed, but it came out brittle. You wouldn't. I smiled, catching her reflection in the window. Melissa, my dear, you underestimate what a woman with nothing left to lose and a good lawyer can do. She stormed out, slamming the door so hard the picture frames rattled. Ryan lingered a moment longer. Mom, he said quietly, you're really going through with this? I turned back to him, and for a moment I saw the little boy he used to be, one who brought me wildflowers and said I was the best mom in the world. But that boy was gone, replaced by a man who'd forgotten who paid for his roof. Yes, I said, I'm going through with it. When he left, I sat back at my desk, opened the laptop again, and scrolled through my sent folder. There it was, Invoice 001. Neat, professional, undeniable. The cursor blinked at the bottom of the screen, waiting for the next move. I smiled to myself, whispered, Interest applies after 14 days, and hit save. For once, the silence in that house didn't feel empty. It felt like waiting. Mr. Barrett's office hadn't changed in 30 years. The same heavy oak desk, the same smell of paper and tobacco, the same brass lamp that hummed faintly when it flickered on. He looked older now, smaller somehow, but his eyes were still sharp, the kind that didn't need glasses to see the truth. Mrs. Hart, he said, standing to greet me with that old-fashioned courtesy that had gone out of style. Or should I say, Mrs. Tanya Whitmore Hart, co-owner of 47 Shadow Ridge Lane. The way he said it made me pause. Cooner? He smiled, slow and knowing. Yes, ma'am. You never signed the final quitclaim deed. The transfer was initiated, but not completed. Technically, the property is still held jointly between you and your son. He flipped through the old file, tapping one yellowed page. Your name is still on the county record. They've been living in your house all this time. For a moment, I didn't speak. The satisfaction didn't come like fireworks, it came like sunrise, slow and steady, lighting every dark corner that had been waiting for it. So they've been telling people I live here for free, I said softly, when in fact, they're the tenants. Mr. Barrett chuckled, his thin lips curling upward. Well, technically, they're squatting with style. I laughed, the sound surprising both of us. He slid another folder across the desk. But there's more. Do you remember your late husband's company, Hart Finance? Of course, I said. Ryan took it over after Henry passed. Well, Barrett continued, Henry left you a small, non-voting share in the company, 3%, to be precise. Barely enough to notice, but just enough to make you a shareholder. And that means, he leaned back, the corner of his mouth twitching, you have the legal right to request a financial audit, any time you like. I blinked. You mean to tell me that after all this time, I still have a say in that company? He nodded. A legal one, yes. And considering the IRS already takes interest in misclassified household employment, I didn't need him to finish. I looked down at my old purse resting on my lap, the same one that had carried the invoice. Inside, I could almost feel the papers shifting, like they were alive, waiting for their next act. They wanted me quiet, I said, rising from the chair. Let's make sure silence gets loud. Barrett smiled. I'll prepare the filings. That afternoon, I sent 2 letters sewn to the IRS, one to the Arizona Business Board each, with proof of unpaid labor, falsified deductions, and my name on the deed. It wasn't vengeance, it was bookkeeping. 2 weeks later, silence bloomed. On the 14th day, everything changed. It began with a phone call, Ryan's voice, sharp, panicked, brittle. Mom, did you do something? The company's accounts are frozen. Frozen? I asked, stirring my tea. That sounds unpleasant. Don't play dumb, he snapped. The IRS is investigating us for false employment claims and undeclared income. They said something about domestic labor deductions. I said, taking a slow sip. Sounds serious. Maybe you should hire a lawyer. A real one this time. You think this is funny? His voice cracked, the edge between anger and fear. No, I said softly. I think it's fair. He hung up without saying goodbye. An hour later, Melissa's shriek echoed through the house. You ruined us! She screamed from the living room, waving her phone like a weapon. My sponsorship's gone. They're saying I exploited family labor for brand partnerships. They're calling me a fraud. I looked up from my crossword puzzle. Well, I said gently, you did. Her eyes burned with disbelief. You can't possibly understand what you've done. My reputation. Your reputation, I interrupted, was built on other people's work. I simply sent the receipts. Ryan stormed in behind her, his tie loose, his voice trembling. They're auditing the company, Mom. Barrett sent over documentation. You still own part of the business. How could you use that against us? I met his gaze, calm and steady. I didn't use it against you, Ryan. I used it for the truth. He shook his head, his voice breaking. We could lose everything. I set down my pen, folded my crossword neatly, and said, Then maybe it's time you learn what it's like to earn something back. Melissa made a strangled sound, half fury, half panic. You're evil. You've been planning this. Oh no, dear, I said with a small smile. Planning takes effort. I just kept the papers. The house went quiet then, except for the sound of Melissa's frantic breathing. Somewhere in the distance, a phone dinged a notification from the news. I didn't need to look. I knew what it was. The headline would read something like, Hart Finance under federal investigation for domestic labor fraud. By evening, the story had gone viral. Local reporters camped outside the gate. A drone hovered over the pool, filming the chaos as if it were a reality show finale. Melissa's influencer brand dropped her within hours. Sponsors pulled their contracts, citing ethical inconsistencies. Screenshots of her social media posts, smiling selfies about family values and gratitude spread across Twitter like wildfire, now paired with captions dripping in irony. Ryan's company account was frozen, his personal accounts under review. Employees whispered about the investigation, about the unpaid grandmother who had become the whistleblower. And me? I sat on the porch, the desert wind brushing against my face, and watched the sun dip behind Camelback Mountain. I didn't feel triumph. I felt balance. That night, Barrett called. "The IRS accepted your report," he said. "They're pursuing charges. It's going to get messy for them." "I imagine it will," I said. "Doesn't truth always?" He chuckled softly. "You know, Tanya, you could file to reclaim full ownership of the house now. Legally, it's yours." I thought about that for a moment, then smiled. "Not yet. Let them sit in it a while. Let them feel what borrowed walls sound like when they start echoing back." After we hung up, I poured myself a small glass of wine, the good kind Henry used to save for Christmas. I raised it toward the empty air. "To unpaid labor," I said quietly, "and overdue justice." The glass clinked softly, and for the first time in years, the house felt like it belonged to me again. Not because of the title, or the money, or the law, but because silence, at long last, had spoken loudly enough. Morning came too bright, the Arizona sun harsh as truth. The house gleamed like a stage after the show had died. Sirens whispered closer. I stirred my tea when Melissa's phone buzzed. She read the headline aloud, voice trembling. I didn't need to look, I'd already written it. "CEO accused of exploiting own mother in domestic labor fraud," she said, her tone caught between disbelief and fury. "This is insane. This is defamation." Ryan came stumbling down the stairs, his shirt half-buttoned, tie hanging loose around his neck. "It's everywhere," he muttered. "Channel 8, Channel 12, Online Mom, what did you do?" I looked up at him, calm as the porcelain cup in my hand. "I sent some emails." "Emails?" Melissa's voice went shrill. "You sent the IRS emails, Tanya. You destroyed us." "Destroyed?" I repeated. "No, dear. I audited you." Before she could retort, a knock came at the door, 3 firm, professional knocks that made the room shrink. Ryan froze. Melissa went pale. I took one last sip of tea and set the cup down gently. "That'll be for you," I said. Through the frosted glass, we could see the silhouettes of 2 uniformed officers. Ryan opened the door with trembling hands. "Mr. and Mrs. Hart?" one of them asked. "We have a temporary asset seizure order issued under the Federal Employment Misrepresentation Act. All property, digital and physical, under the Hart Finance corporate umbrella will be frozen pending investigation." Melissa's voice cracked. "You can't do this. This is our house." I stood then, slow and steady, brushing invisible dust from my sleeve. "Correction, dear," I said, walking toward them. "It's my house. You were just renting my kindness." The officer's eyes flickered with surprise, perhaps recognizing the woman from the news articles, the grandmother whistleblower. Melissa's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Her face turned the color of dry clay. Ryan looked at me, his eyes glassy. "Mom, please," he whispered. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." I met his gaze, and for a moment I saw the boy he used to Beth, one who used to run into my arms after scraped knees, who used to say, "I'll take care of you when I'm big, Mom." But life has a cruel way of turning promises into paperwork. "Intentions don't pay bills, Ryan," I said softly. "Paperwork does." He flinched, like the words themselves stung. "I was trying to help us," he said, his voice cracking. "The deductions, the business write-offs, it was supposed to be temporary." "Temporary deceit is still deceit," I replied. "And you didn't help us, son. You helped yourself until the truth caught up." The officers began their work, reading through the order, tagging documents, photographing the property. Melissa followed them, babbling desperately. "This is a mistake. We didn't exploit anyone," she volunteered. "Tell them, Tanya, tell them, you did it out of love." I turned to her, and something in her desperation almost made me pity her. Almost. "I did do it out of love," I said quietly. "And you took that love and wrote it off on your taxes." Her face twisted. "You're vile," she spat. "You're vindictive. You've embarrassed your own family." "No, dear," I said, voice steady. "You embarrassed yourselves. I just sent the receipts." One of the officers looked at me with a small nod of quiet respect before turning back to his work. Ryan sat on the stairs, his head in his hands, as if the weight of his own choices had finally settled where excuses used to live. The reporters arrived not long after. I could see their cameras through the window-long lenses glinting in the sun, waiting for a quote, a reaction, a soundbite. One brave young journalist called out from the sidewalk, "Mrs. Hart, do you have anything to say to your son and daughter-in-law?" I opened the front door just wide enough for them to see me, the teacup still in my hand. "Yes," I said. "I hope they learn to read the fine print next time." Flashbulbs went off like tiny explosions. Melissa screamed something obscene from the background, but the microphones were already focused on me. Within hours, the footage was everywhere. The calm grandmother in the gray cardigan, the steaming cup of tea, the police escorting her son and his wife out of a Scottsdale mansion. The internet, that cruel and fickle beast, had a new hero. "Justice for Tanya" trended across Twitter by afternoon. People called me the Arizona Iron Grandma, Queen of Receipts, and Matriarch of the Year. Someone even edited my photo with the quote, "Intentions don't pay bills. Paperwork does." It became a meme, half empowerment, half warning. Melissa vanished from social media within days. Her sponsors terminated all contracts, citing ethical breaches. Tabloids ran side-by-side photos, one of her smiling with designer handbags, the other of her leaving court with a file folder pressed to her chest, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Ryan resigned as CEO. His board had unanimously agreed that the company needed new leadership during its period of compliance review. In plainer words, they pushed him out. Meanwhile, Barrett called again. "Tanya," he said, "the court just ruled in your favor on the property. You're the sole owner now. They've been ordered to vacate within 30 days. I thanked him quietly, though I didn't need 30 days. I'd already packed my piece years ago. That evening, the house was silent, except for the hum of the air conditioner. I walked through the rooms one last time. The kitchen where I'd cooked 1,000 meals, no one thanked me for. The living room, where Melissa hung her influencer portraits. The nursery where I used to rock the kids to sleep. It all looked smaller now, like a stage after the curtain fell. Melissa stood by the door, her voice hoarse from crying. "You're really proud of this, aren't you?" I turned to her, calm and certain. "No, dear," I said. "Pride is for the people who think they can't fall. I'm just relieved I finally stood up." Ryan didn't speak. He just looked at me with that hollow kind of grief, the kind you earn. When the last box was closed, I stepped outside, the desert breeze brushing against my skin. The sun was setting, painting the sky in gold and ash. The reporters had gone, the police had left, and the house stood behind me like a memory I no longer owed anything to. I whispered into the evening air, "You called me the babysitter, but I was the one who built the house." The wind carried it away, soft and sure, and somewhere deep in the fading light, I could almost hear Henry's voice saying, "Well done, Tanya." The courtroom was colder than I expected, sterile, echoing, the kind of place where voices go to die or be reborn. I sat quietly at the plaintiff's table, hands folded on my lap, while Ryan and Melissa whispered frantically to their attorney. They looked smaller now. Not younger, not humbler, just smaller, like the air had finally stopped pretending to hold them up. The judge, a tall woman with silver hair and reading glasses perched low on her nose, shuffled the papers before her. "In the matter of Hart versus Hart Finance and related domestic labor claims," she began, her tone crisp as Arizona sunlight, "this court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Mrs. Tanya Whitmore Hart." For a moment, the world went perfectly still. Then came the sound of Melissa's sharp inhalea gasp that cracked through the silence like glass breaking. The judge continued, unbothered. "The evidence clearly demonstrates that the plaintiff remains the sole legal co-owner of the property at 47 Shadow Ridge Lane. Furthermore, due to improper financial classification of unpaid labor and the resulting tax discrepancies, the court hereby transfers full ownership of said property to Mrs. Whitmore Hart." She paused, just long enough for the weight of her words to sink in. Additionally, the defendants, Mr. Ryan Hart and Mrs. Melissa Hart, are ordered to pay $68,000 in restitution and back taxes related to misreported deductions. Ryan's shoulders dropped, the fight leaving him like air from a punctured balloon. Melissa buried her face in her hands, whispering something under her breath, maybe a prayer, maybe another insult. I didn't care which. But the judge wasn't done. "Lastly," she said, "the court acknowledges Mrs. Whitmore Hart's 3% ownership stake in Hart Finance and restores her full voting rights as a shareholder, effective immediately. That was the moment I saw the flicker of realization in Ryan's eyes. For the first time, he understood that I hadn't just survived him. I had outmaneuvered him. Melissa shot up from her seat. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "She's doing this for attention. She's old, she doesn't even understand what she's won." The judge didn't even look up. "Mrs. Hart, sit down, and for the record, she understands perfectly. You might take notes." The courtroom rippled with muffled laughter. Melissa slumped back into her chair, defeated. Ryan turned to me, his voice low and trembling. "Mom, please, you don't have to take the house. You don't have to do this." I met his gaze, calm and unshaken. "I didn't take anything, Ryan. I just stopped giving it away." The gavel struck once, clean and final. The sound echoed through the room like closure. The bailiff announced the session adjourned, and people began to stand, reporters, spectators, even a few lawyers who clearly stayed just to see how it would end. When I rose, a camera flash went off, then another, and another. Someone whispered, "That's Hertha Babysitter Grandma." Outside, the press swarmed the courthouse steps. The air was thick with microphones, voices, and questions shouted over one another. "Mrs. Hart, how does it feel to win? Do you think this sets a precedent for family labor rights? What message do you have for other grandmothers being taken advantage of?" I stopped halfway down the stairs, sunlight catching on the silver clasp of my old purse, the same one that had carried my invoice, my proof, my peace. I took a breath and said only one thing: "Justice doesn't shout, it sends emails." The crowd went wild. Cameras clicked, people laughed, some even clapped. It wasn't the roar of triumph, it was the sound of recognition. The story they thought was about revenge was really about respect. By that evening, the headlines were everywhere. The babysitter who sent an invoice and owned the house. Arizona grandma outwits son and daughter-in-law in viral court case. Justice served with a cup of tea. Tanya Hart becomes symbol of silent strength. The internet had crowned me again, though this time the crown didn't feel heavy. Talk shows replayed my quote on loop. Commentators debated whether I was ruthless or revolutionary. Women's groups flooded my inbox with messages of gratitude and solidarity. "You reminded us that love doesn't mean free labor," one woman wrote. "You taught us to keep receipts, not resentment." I smiled at that one. It was exactly what Henry would have said. 2 days later, I sat in Barrett's office again, sipping coffee while he reviewed the final paperwork. "Congratulations, Tanya," he said, signing the last page with a flourish. "The house, the restitution, the share, it's all done. You're officially the most powerful grandmother in Scottsdale." I laughed softly. "Power is a funny thing, Barrett. People only see it when you stop using it to make them comfortable." He grinned. "You planning to move back into the house?" I shook my head. "No. I think I'll sell it. Let someone else make memories there. I'm done living in museums." When I left his office, the desert wind met me like an old friend, warm, steady, forgiving. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, breathing it in, watching the sunlight spill across the street. For the first time in years, it felt like my world fit again. I wasn't just a mother, or a widow, or a babysitter. I was the woman who sent an invoice and got her life back. And as I walked away, purse swinging lightly at my side, I whispered to myself, "Silence isn't weakness. It's the sound justice makes before it hits send." A year later, the house finally sounded like it belonged to me again. No arguments, no slammed doors, no footsteps of people who mistook my love for labor. Just the slow hum of the ceiling fan and the faint whistle of the Arizona wind pressing against the open windows. Peace, I realized, had a sound. It was quiet, but it filled the room all the same. The newspapers had long since moved on, though once in a while a new article would pop up online. "Remember Tanya Hart, the grandma who sent an invoice?" People still shared it with captions like goals or icon. I didn't mind. They could keep the headlines. I'd kept the peace. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I taught a class at the Scottsdale Community Center. The sign on the door read, "Financial Dignity for Seniors, How to Invoice Your Worth." It started with just 5 women widows, grandmothers, retired teachers who had spent decades helping everyone but themselves. By the 6th week, there were 30. Some took notes carefully, others just came to listen. I would begin every session with the same words. We can't make people fair, but we can make them accountable. Then I'd smile and add, preferably with paperwork. The room always filled with laughter, the kind that came from women who'd spent a lifetime biting their tongues and were finally learning how to use them again. We talked about everything: pensions, co-signed loans, invisible labor, boundaries that weren't walls but gates with locks that only opened when respect knocked first. They took home handouts titled Invoice Template for Emotional Labor and Retirement Planning for the Overlooked. One of them, a woman named Gloria, hugged me after class once and said, "You didn't just send an invoice, Tanya, you sent a message." Maybe I did. I didn't start teaching to be admired. I did it because silence had served me once, and I didn't want it to serve anyone else again. One afternoon, as I was packing up, a young reporter lingered by the doorway, clutching a notebook. She looked barely 30, fresh-faced, nervous, the way Melissa once looked before her words started cutting like knives. "Mrs. Hart," she said softly, "may I ask, was this revenge?" I smiled, slow and sure, the same way I did the day the judge read the verdict. "No," I said, "it was accounting." Her eyebrows lifted slightly, then she laughed a real laugh, surprised and bright. "That's perfect," she said. "Can I quote you?" "Please do," I said. "Just make sure you spell my name right." That night, the article went live. From Babysitter to Bookkeeper of Justice, Tanya Hart teaches women to invoice their worth. It went modestly viral, not like the scandal had, but softly, warmly, like something that didn't need to scream to be heard. Evenings were quiet now. I sipped chamomile tea, sunset spilling gold across the floor. On the wall hung I invoice 001 babysitting services rendered, unpaid. Beneath it, my handwriting read, "Love is free, labor isn't, respect has interest." I smiled at it, not from bitterness, but balance. As I sat by the window, I thought of Ryan sometimes. He had started over in Flagstaff, working quietly as a financial advisor for seniors of all things. We'd spoken once, months ago. He said, "I understand now, Mom, I really do." And for once, I believed him. Melissa, I heard, was trying to rebuild her brand, this time promoting honesty in family finance. The irony didn't sting anymore. I figured if the world had finally taught her humility, then maybe justice really does have a sense of humor. I finished my tea, rinsed the cup, and opened the window wider. The desert breeze swept in, warm and dry, brushing through my silver hair. Outside, the sky was an ocean of copper and lavender. Arizona light, unforgiving but honest. My kind of light. I stepped onto the porch, the wood creaking beneath my feet. The wind carried the faint sound of children playing somewhere down the street, the echo of laughter untouched by greed or guilt. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting it fill me. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting to be needed. I was simply here, accounted for, valued, whole. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I heard my own voice, the one that used to whisper from a place of exhaustion and quiet defiance. Only now it sounded stronger, clearer, like a closing statement delivered with a smile. "They called me the babysitter," I murmured, the words soft but sure. I called my lawyer, and together we called it justice. The last light of the day caught the brass frame of the invoice, making it glow like a medal. The world outside went still, the horizon burning gold. I leaned on the porch rail, the Arizona sun warming my skin, and let out a breath that felt like peace with receipts, the only kind that truly lasts. And that was my story. One cup of tea, one invoice, and one very long overdue reminder that kindness is not free labor. If this story made you smile, if it made you whisper finally under your breath, then you already know what to do. Subscribe to Grandma True Stories, where every week we share the tales of women who've lived enough to know that justice doesn't always come with sirens. Sometimes it comes with receipts.